The Shamans of the Old Stone Age. Since the birth of our species some 30,000 years ago, the Earth has experienced two glacial periods. During this time, a large part of the globe was covered by massive ice sheets. It was in this environment that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens began to show their first creative expressions. Neanderthals made shell necklaces, which they colored with pigments. They might have buried their dead, and recently we have also found a cave painting dated to this period. Homo sapiens mostly made cave paintings of animals, but sometimes we also find mysterious, half-human, half-animal hybrids. We found a lion man, a bird man, a bison man, and even a sort of deer owl man among these paintings. And some of them were found in the deepest, most inaccessible parts of the caves. Imagine for a moment descending into the pitch-black darkness of these claustrophobic caves, with only a flickering candlelight to materialize these figures out of the darkness. This experience is so intense that most historians agree that these paintings must have had some deep religious meanings, and that it likely has something to do with shamanism. And then there are the mysterious so-called Venus figures, which show the female figure with exaggerated fertility markers, such as hips and breasts. Yet in most cases their faces are mysteriously left blank. Now let's start our exploration of the art of the Paleolithic, the Old Stone Age.
Hey, good to see you. This is Stephan, author of In Search of the Sublime. On this World History channel, we'll trace humanity's relentless pursuit of scientific truth, moral excellence, and enlightenment. We'll meet anyone from Mesopotamian astronomers and Indian yogis to Greek philosophers and Enlightenment scientists. And you'll meet them firsthand using primary sources, giving you valuable insights that transcend the surface-level understanding you get on other channels. Go check it out for yourself. Let's start.
Our species, Homo sapiens, spent a large chunk of its early days surrounded by ice. Since the birth of our species some 30,000 years ago, the Earth went to two so-called glacial periods, the last one occurring between 115,000 years ago and 11,700 years ago. These glacial periods and the warmer interglacial periods in between them are all part of the most recent Ice Age, which started more than 2,500 years ago and is actually still ongoing today. We are now in one of those interglacial periods, during which it is slightly warmer, but still much colder than if we weren't in an Ice Age. During the last glacial period, a large part of the globe was covered by massive ice sheets, in some places several kilometers thick. And with so much water locked in ice, sea levels were a stunning 125 meters lower than they are today, exposing enormous swaths of land that are now well below sea level. For instance, the North Sea at that time had dried up, connecting the United Kingdom with continental Europe. Up until the last glacial period, many species of megafauna also roamed the globe, including mammoths, the woolly rhinoceros, saber-toothed cats, glyptodons, cave bears, the giant deer, and so on. For reasons still debated, many of these animals went extinct as the ice retreated. Let's now discuss the art of the Neanderthals. Recently it was proposed that several cave paintings in Spain, including the outlines of hands and drawings of animals, might have been created by Neanderthals. These paintings are dated to a stunning 64,000 years ago, at a time Homo sapiens had not yet arrived in Europe. For the earliest evidence of Homo sapiens in Europe is usually dated to about 45,000 years ago. This date is 20,000 years earlier than the Neanderthal painting that we just discussed. A recent find of a single damaged tooth may push the date of the first Homo sapiens in Europe back to 45,000 years ago, but that would still be 10,000 years earlier. And this research isn't conclusive. And here, by the way, we see a modern sketch of these cave paintings. We can clearly see the parts of animals and also some weird geometric shapes. We've also found pierced and painted shells associated with Neanderthal remains. These shells were likely part of necklaces, and it appears that Neanderthals also buried their dead in caves. The evidence presented for this in the past has often been questionable, yet in at least 2 instances, in Chapelle-aux-Saints in France and in Kabara, Israel, we have found complete skeletons placed in what seem to be hand-dug holes. In both cases, these holes just seem too regular to have formed naturally, as they have vertical edges, and the holes also seem to fit the bodies quite perfectly. We've also found red ochre on some of these Neanderthal skeletons, sometimes also accompanied by stone tools and animal bones. If these skeletons are also part of burials, of which we aren't sure by the way, these might well constitute the earliest evidence of funeral rituals, where these stone tools are perhaps buried with the deceased to use in the afterlife, an idea we see popped up around the globe at a later time. But both the Neanderthal skeletons and the animals that we found in those caves might have died there accidentally, and in that case, we can't even speak of a grave. Now let's move over to the early Homo sapiens. The earliest evidence of Homo sapien art comes in the form of simple crosses scratched on a piece of ochre in a cave in South Africa, dated to a stunning 77,000 years ago. The first actual cave painting by Homo sapiens dates to much later, to 44,000 years ago, from the caves of Maros Pangkep in Indonesia. Here we found the outlines of hands and also what appears to be a hunting scene. We see here a number of figures hunting pigs and water buffalo. Now let's zoom in on these figures. These figures are definitely human-like, yet they also appear to have beaks, and one of them even has what seems to be a tail. And as we shall see in a moment, these human-animal hybrids were very common in early art. More advanced cave art can be found in the Chauvet cave in France, dated to about 30,000 years ago. This art is known for its remarkable realism and dynamism, meaning that the animals almost seem to move. I hope you agree these are stunning pictures, and can easily be classified as true art. The most famous cave art was made in Lascaux, which is dated to about 17,000 BC. Here too, the animals are portrayed in a surprisingly realistic style. In Lascaux, we have also found simple candles consisting of stone cups in which animal fat was burned. Last year, on the morning of my wedding, I gave my friends and family a tour to the replica of Lascaux, which was a lot of fun to do. And let me now take you on that tour as well. When we enter Lascaux through a small hall, we descend down into a large room that is now called the Hall of the Bulls, which has on its surrounding walls large images of bulls, horses and stags. This room converges towards a smaller tunnel, which is also covered with beautiful images. It is known as the Axial Gallery. Less obvious is a much smaller passageway on the side. In the past, this opening was so small that people had to crouch down to enter. At the end of that passageway, the path splits up once more. In one direction, we end up in a narrow and long tunnel, at the end of which we find engravings of lions, some pierced with spears. And in the other direction, the floor suddenly drops about 5 meters, leading to what is now called the shaft. Today in the cave, a ladder is installed to reach the bottom. It must have been quite a challenge to reach the bottom back in the day. Here in the shaft, we find something remarkable. An image of what appears to be a man wearing a bird mask, next to a staff with a bird on top. For unknown reasons, this human figure is drawn much more abstractly than the animals. Although we will probably never know the true meaning behind this mysterious scene, many historians believe that we are looking at the oldest image of a shaman. To this day, these magician priests are integral to many hunter-gatherer tribes, and they are often dressed as animals during their rituals. More evidence for this hypothesis comes from the Trois Frères cave system, also in France and dated to 13,000 BC. In this cave, we find a human-like figure with antlers and also a human-like figure dressed as a bison. And here we see two modern sketches of these figures. The figure on the right is an engraving, and the figure on the left is a combination between an engraving and a painting. And since engravings are very hard to photograph, these sketches were made back in the day. The sketch on the left, by the way, remains somewhat controversial, as some scholars believe that the antlers in this figure might actually be natural cracks in the rock. But antlers or not, these are both clear animal-human hybrids. Very mysterious figures. And here, by the way, we see in the middle that bison man, drawn in the middle of a lot of engravings of animals. We've also found various bone flutes in German caves, the oldest dating to a stunning 42,000 BC. It is likely that these instruments were not used for sheer entertainment, but also had some ritualistic purpose, as is true in many tribal cultures today. The story we've told so far of these mysterious figures gets even more mysterious if we take into account how incredibly difficult it is to reach the deeper parts of some of these caves. An early researcher of the Trois Frères cave system, Dr. Herbert Kuhn, described his memorable descent into this cave as follows. How magnificent the stalactites are! The soft drop of water can be heard dripping from the ceiling. There is no other sound and nothing moves. The silence is eerie. The gallery is large and long, and then there comes a very low tunnel. We placed our lamps on the ground and we pushed it into the hole. The tunnel is not much broader than my shoulders, nor higher. I can hear the others before me groaning and see how very slowly their lamps push on. With our arms pressed close to our sides, we wriggle forwards on our stomachs like snakes. The passage in places is hardly a foot high, so that you have to lay your face right on the earth. I felt as though I was creeping through a coffin. You cannot lift your head, you cannot breathe, and then, finally, the burrow becomes slightly higher, and one can at least rest one's forearms. But not for long. The way again grows narrow, and so yard by yard one struggles on, some 40 yards in all. It is terrible to have the roof so close to one's head, and it is very hard. I bump it time and again. Will this ever end? But then, suddenly, we are through, and everybody breathes. It's like a redemption. The hall in which we are now standing is gigantic. We let the lights of the lamps run along the ceiling and the walls. A majestic room. And there, finally, are the pictures. From top to bottom, a whole wall is covered with engravings. The surface had been worked with tools of stone. And there we see marshaled the beast that lived at the time in southern France. We see the mammoth, the rhinoceros, bison, wild horse, the bear, the wild ass, the reindeer, the wolverine, the musk ox. And also smaller animals appear, snowy owls, hares and fish. And one sees darts everywhere flying at the game. Several pictures of bears attract us in particular, for they have holes where the images were struck and blood is shown spouting from their mouths. Truly a picture of the hunt, the picture of the magic of the hunt. Entering this cave is such an effort that it is hard to believe that this art merely served as a means for creative expression. It seems reasonable to assume that there must have been some deeper religious motivation. Perhaps, as has been suggested, they were mimicking a descent into the underworld, as is still a common motif among modern tribes. Or perhaps these caves functioned as sacred spaces similar to later temples and churches. But these are nothing more than mere speculations. In Lascaux, Trois Frères and many other caves, some of the animals are also accompanied with a line of dots or a number of lines. It was recently proposed that the number of dots correspond to the birth or the mating seasons of various animals, as measured in lunar months since springtime. And this matches reasonably well, so it might in fact be true. And if this discovery holds up, it is the first evidence for both the use of a rudimentary lunar calendar and also some kind of proto-writing, although here in a very early stage. We've also found various sculptures from the Paleolithic. A great example are sculpted bisons from the Trois Frères cave system, dating to about 13,000 BC. Even older sculptures were found in German caves. The most magnificent one is the beautiful Lion Man from the Hohenstein-Stadel cave, from between 40 and 35,000 BC. As you can see, we again here have this human-animal hybrid. Again, a very mysterious figure. And here we see a beautiful ivory sculpture of a horse from the Vogelherd cave, from an estimated 30,000 BC. Crucially, we have also found small sculptures of the female figure in various countries of Europe, and these are now known as Venus figurines. These figures frequently feature greatly exaggerated breasts and hips, and in various instances the genitals are also clearly marked out. Special attention was also given to the hair, while the faces were left blank. Given that all these features are associated with fertility, these figures have often been interpreted as fertility symbols, representing woman in her role as life giver. Although who knows, they might in fact just be Stone Age pornography. And finally, I have to mention a number of elaborate burials from this period, found in Sungir, Russia, and dated to 35,000 BC. One of these graves contains the skeletons of two teenagers placed head to head. Each of these skeletons was covered with about 5,000 mammoth ivory beads, which were likely originally attached to their clothing. And it is estimated that it would have taken thousands of hours to make these beads. One of these teenagers also has a belt containing 250 polar fox teeth, which corresponds to about 60 foxes, and also a small ivory statuette of a mammoth. And running parallel to both bodies was found a 2.4 meters long straightened mammoth tusk. The fact that these children were singled out for such a lavish burial suggests a strong social hierarchy must have existed among these people, with a small elite having higher status than the rest of the tribe. And hereby we conclude our overview of Paleolithic art and the mysterious first images of shamans. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to know more about this topic, the Paleolithic, or one of the many other topics from world history, read my book In Search of the Sublime. You can buy it on Amazon or you can read it for free on worldhistorybook.com. See you next time.